Blue blood. You have heard the phrase before. It lingers in history books, in the stories of kings and queens, of monarchs and dynasties. But have you ever stopped to wonder why it is called blue? Not golden blood, not divine blood, not even red blood. The actual color that flows through our veins. Why blue? This is not just a poetic phrase. It is a riddle that opens the door to one of humanity's deepest mysteries. Behind this seemingly simple expression lies an echo of something far older, something half forgotten. The idea of blood that is not quite like ours, of a lineage that stands apart from common humanity, hints at a truth that history has buried beneath layers of myth, superstition, and denial. And when you begin to peel those layers back, you encounter something both fascinating and unsettling: the memory of the blue ones. Who were they? Were they gods? Were they teachers? Were they extraterrestrial visitors? Were they human beings of a strange pale complexion, whose very veins seemed to glow blue under their skin? Different cultures remember them in different ways. In India, they are remembered in the blue skin of Krishna. In Egypt, they appear in the blue-green figure of Osiris, the god of resurrection. In the Americas, Mayan deities were painted in shades of azure and turquoise. And in Europe, their legacy became the myth of royalty with blue blood. Across civilizations that never met, the color blue keeps reappearing, attached to figures of power, wisdom, and transcendence. But here is the paradox, the uncomfortable question. If all of these civilizations, separated by oceans and centuries, carried the same strange memory, could they all have been imagining the same thing? Or is there a hidden truth, scattered like fragments of an ancient code, waiting for us to remember? You were taught that myths are just stories, that gods are just symbols, that tales of Atlantis, Arcturian beings, or blue-skinned teachers are nothing more than fantasy. But what if this is the greatest lie ever told? What if these stories are not random inventions but distorted memories of something that actually walked the earth? What if the blue gods were real? This is where the controversy begins. Because to even entertain this idea, you have to confront the possibility that history as you know it is incomplete. That the official record, the one written by victors and repeated in schools, is missing entire chapters. Chapters that describe civilizations guided by beings who were not entirely human. Chapters that speak of a lineage hidden in caves and temples, cultivating knowledge in silence, and shaping the myths that later defined kings, vampires, angels, and gods. Here is the counterintuitive truth. The story of humanity is not simply about evolution from primitive ancestors to modern humans. It is also about contact, influence, and guidance from beings whose very presence defied our categories. The blue ones are one of those mysteries, too human to be dismissed as fantasy, too otherworldly to fit into the textbooks. And here is where you might feel a quiet ache, a subtle pain you cannot name. Because deep down, part of you has always sensed that something was missing from the story of your origins. Something in you has always resisted the idea that life is just survival, reproduction, and randomness. You feel that there is more, and you are right. The reward of looking into this mystery is immediate. You realize that you are not powerless, not random, not forgotten. You belong to a lineage of consciousness that stretches beyond nations, beyond religions, beyond even the boundaries of Earth. To remember the blue gods is to remember that humanity itself is not an accident, but a project of consciousness, guided, nurtured, and sometimes challenged by beings who understood more than we can yet grasp. The blue ones were not painted blue for artistic flair. They were remembered that way because of their appearance, their biology, their connection to light and frequency. Pale beings whose veins showed through their skin. Teachers who avoided the sun, meditated in darkness, and awakened visions through the pineal gland. From their lives emerged the myths of immortals who only walked at night, of eternal vampires, of kings with divine blood. And if this sounds like myth to you, remember that myth is often just memory wrapped in symbol. So, what does this mean for us today? Why does it matter that Krishna was painted blue, that Osiris was painted blue, that royal dynasties claim to have blue blood? It matters because we are standing on the threshold of a new vibration. Humanity is moving from green, the color of healing, into blue, the color of truth, wisdom, and creation. We are about to rediscover the very frequency that the blue ones embodied, and with it we are invited to remember who we really are. This is not just about ancient history, it is about your life right now. Every time you feel that longing for something greater, every time you sense that reality is more than what meets the eye, you are answering the same call, the call of the blue gods. In this video, we will dive into their origins, their symbolism across cultures, the mystery of blue as a frequency of consciousness, and why this forgotten chapter of history may be the key to our awakening today. By the end, you will see the myths of royalty, vampires, gods, and angels in a new light. And you may realize that the blue ones were never gone. They are alive in the memory of humanity and in the frequency that is awakening in you right now. So stay with me. Because what you are about to uncover is not just a story, it is a remembrance, and once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. To understand the mystery of the blue ones, we must go back, not hundreds of years, not even thousands, but tens of thousands, and perhaps even millions. History as you know it begins in textbooks with the birth of civilization, with Sumer, with Egypt, with the Indus Valley. But that is only the last chapter of a much longer story. Before the rise of kings and temples, there were other teachers, other architects of human consciousness. Among them, the blue ones stand as some of the most enigmatic. According to ancient memories whispered in esoteric traditions and echoed in myths, the blue ones were present in Atlantis. Not Atlantis as a metaphor, but Atlantis as a real civilization that existed long before recorded history, one that rose and fell, leaving behind fragments in legend. The blue ones were said to be among its first founders, shaping the spiritual and intellectual life of that mysterious world. But who were they really? Some say they were not originally human. The earliest blue ones were described as Arcturians, beings from a higher dimension, traveling across realities not through time and space as we know it, but in vessels of light, spinning so fast they became what mystics call a Merkaba. To us, a Merkaba looks like a geometric vehicle of light, but to them it was simple movement, the way we might walk across a room. When these beings came into contact with Earth, they did not come to conquer. They came as guides, as observers, as seeds of consciousness. They lived hidden lives, not ruling empires or demanding worship, but teaching in silence, passing on the keys to meditation, energy, and the subtle technologies of the mind. Their appearance set them apart. They avoided the sun, preferring to live in caves, tunnels, and temples where darkness allowed their inner vision to awaken. Because they were so pale, their veins shone beneath their skin. To those who saw them, their bodies seemed faintly blue. Their blood, when deprived of oxygen, reflected this hue even more strongly. To ordinary humans, it looked as though these beings were made of another substance, as if their very essence was different, and so they were called the blue ones. From this biological difference came the seeds of legend. The memory of pale figures who lived underground and only emerged at night inspired two great myths: the myth of kings and queens with blue blood, and the myth of vampires. The first became the story of nobility, of a royal lineage that never worked under the sun, always apart from common humanity. The second became the fear of eternal beings who drank life, walked in shadows, and never aged. Both myths share the same root, the memory of the blue ones. But it was not only appearance that made them different. Their biology responded to light in unusual ways. When the pineal gland of a human is exposed to sunlight, it creates hormones that regulate wakefulness. But in darkness, the pineal generates DMT and dreamlike visions. The blue ones, living in constant shadow, amplified this inner chemistry. Their nights were filled with visions, their meditations with journeys through the cosmos. They became natural visionaries, seeing far beyond ordinary perception. This is why they became advisors, not rulers. They were sought out by those who desired truth, by leaders who wanted guidance, by seekers who needed answers. They carried within them the memory of the universe awakened by their biology and their practice. In silence, in darkness, they remembered. At first, not all of them were human. The earliest were Arcturians, whose presence on Earth is remembered in fragments across spiritual traditions. But over time, their teachings and their way of life attracted humans who lived alongside them. Those humans began to resemble them, not only culturally but biologically. Surrounded by 5 or 6 blue ones, a human might adopt their practices, live in darkness, and develop the same pale complexion, the same visionary capacity. Slowly, the tradition became both alien and human, a fusion of cosmic guidance and earthly evolution. If you try to place this on a timeline, you must abandon the narrow window of mainstream history. The blue ones were not a phenomenon of 5,000 years ago. They were here tens of thousands of years ago, possibly hundreds of thousands. The Arcturian tradition of underground meditation may be over 25,000 years old. The founding of Atlantis, as remembered by mystics, was designed and shaped by them. And yet mainstream history says nothing of this. It tells you that kings invented myths to justify their power, that vampires are only stories, that Krishna was painted blue as a symbol of the infinite. All of that may be partly true. But what if those stories are only the surface, the echo, the distorted memory of real beings who walked the earth? What if the blue ones are the missing link, the bridge between humanity's biology and its spiritual awakening? It is unsettling to think that our history may not belong to us alone, that humanity has been shaped, guided, perhaps even engineered by beings whose origins are not entirely of this world. But this is the story that refuses to die. It survives in myths, in art, in the symbols of nobility, in the colors of gods. The blue ones were not gods in the sense of omnipotent creators. They were beings of light and biology, teachers who lived in darkness, who carried the codes of memory in their very bodies. They remind us that to find truth we must sometimes go underground, away from the noise of the sunlit world, into the shadows where vision awakens. And if this sounds strange, remember, myths are not lies. They are the fingerprints of memory left behind by civilizations that tried to describe what they saw, but could not fully explain. The blue ones are such a memory, one that points to a forgotten chapter of humanity's origins. The phrase blue blood is so familiar that most people never stop to ask where it came from. In history books, it is explained simply as a way to describe aristocracy, a poetic expression meant to separate nobility from common people. But if you look closer, the phrase carries more than a metaphor. It is a symbol of something older, stranger, and far more mysterious. The story begins with a simple observation. Those who worked under the sun had darker skin, weathered by labor, while the aristocracy lived indoors, protected from the elements, their skin pale and translucent. In some cases, the veins beneath their skin appeared blue. This physical detail became a symbol, marking them as different. But what if this symbol did not begin in medieval Europe? What if it goes much deeper, into memories of beings whose very biology set them apart from the rest of humanity? The blue ones, as remembered in ancient traditions, were pale to the point of translucence. Their veins glowed faintly blue, visible under skin that almost seemed like paper. To those who encountered them, this appearance inspired awe and sometimes fear. They seemed fragile, delicate, otherworldly. And yet their knowledge was immense. They were visionaries, guides, advisors. The combination of their unusual appearance and their wisdom created an aura of divinity around them. Over time, this aura became myth. Kings and queens who wanted to appear divine claimed descent from these beings. They said their blood was different, not ordinary, but sacred, not red, but blue. Sangre azul, the Spaniards called it. Blue blood, the English translated. It was not just a metaphor for nobility. It was a declaration of separation from the common human line, a claim to a lineage that reached back to the teachers of Atlantis and beyond. But the myth did not stop there. From the same root came another story, one darker, more haunting. If the blue ones were pale, nocturnal, and lived in caves and shadows, then they became the prototypes for vampires. Eternal beings who avoided the sun, who fed on energies that others did not understand, who seemed to live beyond the limits of normal life. To the fearful imagination of humanity, the blue ones became not only gods but also monsters. And so the same memory gave birth to two opposing myths, the exalted royal with blood of the gods and the terrifying vampire who cursed the night. Think about it. Two of the most powerful archetypes in human culture, royalty and vampires, both trace back to the same source. Both carry the same theme. Blood that is not like ours. Blood that makes someone different. Blood that marks them as either divine or damned. Why does this theme persist across centuries, across continents? Why does the idea of blue blood refuse to die? Because somewhere deep in the human psyche, it is not only a symbol, it is a memory. The memory of pale advisors who lived underground, who never saw the sun, who guided the rulers of ancient civilizations. The memory of beings who were both admired and feared, honored as divine yet whispered about as dangerous. When medieval kings sat on their thrones and claimed to rule by divine right, they were not inventing something new. They were echoing an ancient claim that their lineage connected them to the blue ones. When Gothic tales of vampires spread through Europe, they were not simply fantasy. They were distortions of that same memory, twisted by fear. And here lies the paradox. If the blue ones were guides, not rulers, why would kings claim their bloodline? Why would myths of monsters take shape around them? The answer is simple: power. Whoever could claim descent from the gods or from beings that were not entirely human could justify their rule. Whoever could terrify the people with stories of pale nocturnal beings could control them through fear. Memory became myth, and myth became a tool of authority. But beneath the politics and the fear, something true remained: the color blue. The association of blue with wisdom, with divinity, with difference. From the robes of monarchs to the halos of saints, from the painted skin of Krishna to the aura of Osiris, the symbol of blue carried its resonance forward. Even today, when we hear blue blood, we unconsciously echo a story that began long before history, a story of beings who once walked the earth. So when you think of nobility, when you think of vampires, ask yourself, are these just inventions of human imagination? Or are they distorted memories of a forgotten reality? The answer may disturb you, but it may also liberate you. Because once you see the thread, you realize that myths are not entertainment. They are fragments of truth. And the truth is that humanity was shaped not only by evolution, but by contact, guidance, and memory of those who were different. The myth of blue blood is not just about kings, it is about you. Because if blood is memory, and if memory is passed from generation to generation, then somewhere within your very cells you carry the echo of the blue ones. You may not be pale, you may not see your veins glow under the skin, but your consciousness carries the resonance. And to awaken that resonance is to awaken the part of you that remembers where you came from. When you start looking across the myths of the world, a strange pattern emerges. Separated by oceans, divided by language, and often unaware of each other's existence, ancient civilizations chose to paint some of their most important gods in shades of blue. How can this be explained? Is it coincidence? Is it symbolism? Or is it memory? In India, the figure of Krishna is beloved by millions. He is painted with blue skin, sometimes deep like the midnight sky, sometimes radiant like sapphire. Scholars will tell you this is symbolic, that Krishna's blue represents the infinite, the sky, the ocean, the all-encompassing nature of divinity. And while this interpretation is not wrong, it may not be the whole truth. What if Krishna's blue skin was not only symbolic but descriptive? What if he carried within him the echo of a lineage remembered in the color itself? Travel to Egypt and you find Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, often painted in green-blue hues. Osiris was the one who died and was reborn, who taught humanity agriculture, order, and spiritual renewal. His skin, blue-green, marked him as different, not entirely of this world, but not entirely absent either. Was this simply artistic choice? Or was it memory of beings whose very appearance seemed to glow with a color beyond human flesh? Among the Maya, the color blue was sacred. Priests painted themselves blue for rituals, sacrifices were adorned in blue pigment, and gods were represented in brilliant azure tones. To the Maya, blue was the bridge between the earthly and the divine, between humans and the cosmos. Once again, the color points to something more than decoration. It points to memory. Even in the Christian tradition, hints remain. Archangels are often associated with colors of light. Michael, the protector, is tied to a radiant blue ray. Raphael, the healer, to green and blue. The Church will say these are symbolic, but the deeper pattern suggests something older. Blue is not just a color, it is a frequency, a vibration, a reminder. Why does this matter? Because symbolism can be invented, but repetition across cultures is rarely random. If distant civilizations all chose blue for their divine figures, it suggests they were remembering something real, something seen, something experienced. The blue ones may not have ruled kingdoms, but their presence was so powerful, so unforgettable, that it imprinted itself on human memory in every corner of the world. Of course, the rational mind resists this. It insists that Krishna's skin was never meant to be literal, that Osiris's blue-green is symbolic of rebirth, that Mayan blue was ritualistic. And yet these explanations all avoid the simplest possibility, that once upon a time there were beings who were remembered as blue because they looked that way. Imagine a pale figure, veins glowing faintly blue beneath translucent skin, walking into a village thousands of years ago. Imagine the awe, the fear, the reverence such a being would inspire. Over generations, the story becomes art. Art becomes symbol. Symbol becomes myth. And myth survives long after the memory fades. But if you trace it back far enough, behind every symbol is something someone once saw. And then there is the deeper layer, the layer of frequency. Blue is not only a visual description, it is also an energy. The wavelength of blue light vibrates at a higher frequency than red or green. Across mystical traditions, blue is associated with higher consciousness, wisdom, truth, and transcendence. The blue ones were remembered not only for their appearance, but for the frequency they carried. A frequency that could heal, awaken, and guide. This is why across cultures, blue becomes the color of divinity. It is the color of the sky, the ocean, the infinite. It is the color of gods who descend to teach and angels who protect. It is the vibration of guidance. And perhaps this is why humanity continues to paint its saviors, its protectors, its teachers in shades of blue. Because deep in the human soul, there is a memory of those who carried this frequency. To dismiss this as coincidence is to underestimate the power of collective memory. To see the pattern is to recognize that history is not linear, that myths are not fiction, that across the world humanity has been telling the same story in different tongues. A story of the blue ones, a story of gods who are not entirely gods, of beings who are not entirely human. A story that refuses to die because it is woven into the very fabric of who we are. So when you see Krishna painted blue, when you see Osiris glowing in blue-green, when you see the Mayan priest cloaked in azure, remember, these are not just symbols, they are echoes. They are fragments of a truth too vast to be contained in one culture, one religion, or one story. They are whispers of the blue gods who walked among us and whose memory still calls us to awaken. Why blue? Why not gold? Why not red? Why not green? Why do so many of humanity's most sacred figures carry the mark of blue upon their skin, their aura, their light? The answer is not only in myth or metaphor. The answer is in physics. The answer is in frequency. Every color you see is not just a shade, it is a vibration. Blue is not merely a pigment, it is a frequency of light. Among the visible spectrum, blue vibrates at a higher frequency than red, carrying more energy in its waves. When you look at the sky, you are not simply seeing color, you are seeing scattered light, a vibration of the universe itself. When you look at the ocean, you are not just seeing water, you are seeing the reflection of the heavens, the same frequency embodied in matter. For mystics, this was never abstract. Blue was always associated with higher consciousness, with clarity, with truth. To walk under the blue sky was to walk beneath the infinite. To gaze into the blue ocean was to peer into eternity. Blue was the color of wisdom, of transcendence, of the divine mind itself. But there is another layer, one science now confirms. Radiation. What is radiation? It is light vibrating at such high frequencies that it breaks down matter, rearranges DNA, reshapes life. Radiation is creation and destruction at once. Too much radiation destroys. But the right amount creates mutations, changes, leaps forward in evolution. Life on Earth itself is the product of radiation. Without the sun's light, without its waves breaking the chains of molecules, there would be no evolution, no consciousness, no you. Ancient traditions describe this in other words. They called radiation archangels. They called it the rays of God. Michael, the blue ray. Raphael, the green. Gabriel, the white. Beings of light were described not as individuals, but as frequencies. To speak to an archangel was to encounter a radiation of consciousness, a wavelength of divine mind. The blue ones carried this radiation in their very being. Their appearance, their aura, their presence was not simply pale skin and visible veins. It was the embodiment of a frequency of blue. This is why, across cultures, the color blue is tied not only to gods but to healing, to wisdom, to protection. Blue light heals. Blue light awakens. Blue light pierces through illusion. It is the ray of clarity, the vibration of truth. In the Hindu tradition, Krishna's blue skin is infinite love. In Egypt, Osiris's blue-green is regeneration. In Christian mysticism, Michael's blue ray is protection. In Mayan rites, blue pigment marked the bridge between life and the gods. Different languages, same memory. Different myths, same frequency. But here is where the story deepens. Blue is not just symbolic. Blue is biological. Blood itself, when deprived of oxygen, turns blue. Beneath the surface of our skin, before it oxidizes in air, the essence of life itself is blue. In this sense, all humans carry the mark of the blue ones. We are oxidized beings reflecting red, but beneath it all, the root of our life is blue. This truth shaped both myth and biology. It is why rulers claimed blue blood, why artists painted gods in blue, why mystics described visions in azure light. The symbolism of blue is also practical. Darkness awakens the pineal gland, the inner eye. In shadow, the gland produces DMT, opening visions of higher dimensions. The blue ones, living underground, surrounded by darkness, amplified this process. Their biology became a doorway to cosmic perception. When they emerged, their pale bodies glowed faintly blue. When they taught, their visions were wrapped in indigo light. To follow their path was to awaken that same radiation within yourself. Blue, then, is not only about gods of the past. It is about the frequency that humanity is entering today. We are shifting from green, the vibration of healing, into blue, the vibration of truth. Our age is defined by seekers of knowledge, of authenticity, of awakening. The call of the blue ones is not to worship them, but to remember that you carry their frequency inside you. Every time you pursue truth, every time you pierce through illusion, every time you align with clarity, you embody the blue ray. This is why the symbolism of blue has survived. It is not arbitrary. It is not coincidence. It is the echo of biology, the reflection of physics, the memory of contact with beings who embodied this vibration. To paint gods in blue was to say, these are not like us, and yet they are the essence of us. To speak of blue blood was to say, within certain lineages lies the echo of the divine frequency. To see the sky and the ocean in blue was to remember, we are surrounded above and below by the infinite vibration of consciousness. So the next time you hear the phrase blue blood, the next time you see Krishna's skin painted sapphire, the next time you stand under the sky or gaze into the ocean, remember this. You are not only witnessing color, you are witnessing frequency. You are standing in the radiation of creation itself. And in that moment, you are closer to the blue ones than you realize. When we think of gods, we imagine thrones in the sky, divine beings demanding worship, rulers of creation. But the blue ones were never gods in that sense. They did not seek temples built in their honor. They did not demand sacrifices, nor did they rule with power. Their role was something quieter, something subtler, something easily missed unless you look closer. They were not rulers. They were guides. Hidden from the sun, they lived in caves, tunnels, and temples. They avoided the chaos of villages and cities, preferring silence and shadow. To many, they seemed like hermits or recluses. But those who sought them out discovered something far more profound. The blue ones carried vision. They carried memory. They carried the ability to see beyond the veil of ordinary life. Imagine a time when humanity was young, uncertain, searching for meaning. Hunters and farmers looked at the stars with fear and wonder. Kings sought power, but did not understand wisdom. And then imagine finding someone who could close their eyes, sit in silence, and describe not only the movements of the stars, but the movements of the soul. Someone who could explain the cycles of time, the patterns of life, the hidden meaning in dreams. To encounter a blue one was to encounter the living memory of the universe. And yet they never demanded obedience. They did not crown themselves kings. They did not sit on thrones. Instead, they became advisors, whispering in the ear of rulers, guiding seekers into meditation, teaching initiates how to awaken their own perception. They were teachers, not masters. They offered keys, not chains. This is why they were misunderstood. To those who sought power, their silence looked like weakness. To those who craved worship, their humility looked like insignificance. But to those who were ready, their presence unlocked something deeper. The blue ones taught that truth is not given from outside. It is awakened from within. Consider how different this is from the religions that later emerged. Most gods of myth demand sacrifice, demand temples, demand allegiance. But the memory of the blue ones is different. They did not build empires. They built awareness. They did not fight wars. They fought ignorance. They did not enslave. They liberated. Their tools were not swords or crowns, but silence, meditation, vision, and the alignment of consciousness with frequency. Their way of teaching was biological as much as spiritual. By living in darkness, they awakened the pineal gland. By fasting and meditating, they activated visions. By remaining apart from society, they preserved purity of perception. They taught not through commandments, but through example. And those who practiced as they did began to awaken the same abilities. Humans who lived with them became more like them. They were not worshippers, but apprentices. It is tempting to think of them as gods because their abilities seemed supernatural. They could see across time, remember events that happened millions of years ago, speak of dimensions beyond space. They seemed eternal, wise, almost divine. But in truth, they were simply further along the path of consciousness. They embodied what humanity could become. This is perhaps their greatest lesson. Do not worship those who carry light. Instead, learn to awaken the same light within yourself. The blue ones did not come to be idols. They came to be mirrors. In their silence, they reflected back to humanity what was already within. In their wisdom, they reminded us that the universe is not outside us, but within us. And yet, Because humanity so often misunderstands, their image was twisted. Some remembered them as vampires, beings of the night who stole life. Others remembered them as gods with blue blood, destined to rule. Both are distortions. Both are projections of fear and desire. The truth is simpler and more profound. They were teachers. They were guides. They were reminders of what humanity could become. The danger of worship is that it separates. If you worship the blue ones as gods, you place them above you, unreachable, different. But if you see them as guides, you realize they came to awaken what is already yours. Their pale skin, their blue veins, their hidden lives, all of these were only outer forms. The real gift was their knowledge of consciousness, their ability to show humanity that the universe is alive within every cell, every breath, every thought. Even today, the echo of their guidance survives. Every time you close your eyes and meditate, every time you sit in silence and listen to the rhythm of your own being, you are walking the path they walked. Every time you choose awareness over fear, presence over distraction, vision over illusion, you are remembering what they came to teach. The blue ones may be hidden now, their physical presence long gone or concealed from ordinary sight, but their role as teachers is not finished. They live in the myths, in the colors of gods, in the frequencies of light, in the memory of your own cells. They are still whispering, not as rulers demanding loyalty, but as guides reminding you of your own divinity. So perhaps the question is not whether the blue ones existed. The real question is whether you will listen, whether you will step into silence, into shadow, into vision, and discover that their guidance has always been waiting inside you. Light always casts a shadow, and every truth that humanity remembers can also be twisted into fear. The blue ones, remembered by some as teachers and guides, were remembered by others as something far more haunting. In the same way their pale skin and nocturnal habits inspired reverence among seekers, it also gave rise to terror in the imagination of the masses. Out of this mixture of awe and fear, myths of vampires, monsters, and cursed beings were born. It is easy to see how this happened. The blue ones avoided sunlight. They lived underground, in caves, in hidden temples where darkness helped them expand consciousness through the inner vision of the pineal gland. To the common farmer or villager, what could such habits mean? Beings who never stood under the sun, who only emerged at night, who seemed to carry an otherworldly presence. These were not understood as sages. They were seen as predators. Add to this their appearance. Translucent skin, visible veins glowing faintly blue, fragile bodies that seemed almost ghostly. To the uninitiated eye, such figures looked unnatural, eerie, frightening. To those who sought knowledge, this was a sign of their difference. To those who lived in fear, this was a sign of danger. The same detail that inspired respect in one person inspired terror in another. And then there was the matter of sustenance. While there is no evidence that the blue ones fed on blood, their nocturnal habits and pale features triggered the archetype of the eternal predator. In folk memory, they became associated with feeding on life itself. If they did not eat as humans did, then surely they must survive on something else. And so, in the imagination of fearful minds, they fed on blood, on life force, on the essence of others. From this emerged the vampire, pale, nocturnal, eternal, feeding on the lifeblood of humanity. The myth spread across Europe, but its roots reach much deeper. It is not merely a medieval invention. It is the distortion of an ancient memory. The blue ones, hidden teachers, became night predators in the imagination of those who could not comprehend their difference. This reveals something profound about the human psyche. When faced with the unknown, we either sanctify it or demonize it. The same being can be remembered as a god or a monster, depending on the lens of perception. Kings and priests remembered the blue ones as royal ancestors, carriers of divine blood. Commoners, living in fear, remembered them as monsters who walked at night. Both were distortions, both were projections. The truth was neither god nor monster, but teacher. And yet, the myths of vampires carry hidden truths. They speak of beings who live in darkness, who seem eternal, who carry powers beyond human understanding. They speak of immortality, of the thin veil between life and death, of energies unseen. Though distorted, these myths preserve fragments of memory. The fear wrapped around them is real, but so is the echo of something that once walked the earth. We should not underestimate how powerful fear is in shaping memory. Trauma creates stories. A wound in the collective psyche generates myths that attempt to explain the wound. When ordinary people encountered the Blue Ones, strange beings who looked nothing like them, the encounter itself was a trauma. Out of that trauma, stories were told. Over generations, those stories became legends. Legends became religion. Religion became folklore. And in that transformation, the truth was buried beneath layers of fear. But fear has its function. It forces us to look deeper. It warns us against blind trust, but also challenges us to pierce illusion. The vampire myth, for all its distortions, still calls humanity to confront its shadow. It asks, what do we project onto others when we cannot understand them? What do we fear in ourselves that we hide behind stories of monsters? Perhaps this is the greatest misunderstanding of the Blue Ones. They were never predators. But their very existence confronted humanity with its own fear of difference, its own fear of the unknown. Instead of seeing teachers, many saw monsters. Instead of listening to guidance, many recoiled in terror. And so, the myths of vampires were born, not as reflections of reality, but as mirrors of our own fear. The irony is that in making monsters of the Blue Ones, humanity also concealed their gift. For the vampire myth carries themes of immortality, transcendence, and the thin veil between life and death. These were truths the Blue Ones actually taught. But instead of receiving the teaching, humanity turned it into horror. Instead of awakening, we created fear. So when you hear the story of vampires, when you see pale nocturnal beings feeding on blood in the night, look past the surface. Remember that beneath the distortion lies a memory of guides who once walked among us. They were not gods, not rulers, not monsters. They were teachers. And their greatest lesson is still hidden within the myths that once demonized them. The question is whether we will continue to be ruled by fear, or whether we will finally see through the shadows and remember the truth. If you follow the trail of memory far enough, all paths seem to lead back to one name: Atlantis. A civilization said to have risen in splendor and fallen in mystery, half remembered as myth, half remembered as history. For centuries, seekers, mystics, and philosophers have argued about its reality. Was it a continent swallowed by the sea? Was it only a metaphor in Plato's words? Or was it a memory of a time when humanity lived side by side with beings not entirely human? The Blue Ones are said to have played a central role in that forgotten epic. They were not rulers of Atlantis, but architects of its spirit. They designed traditions, planted seeds of knowledge, and guided initiates into higher states of consciousness. They did not build the walls of the great cities, but they built the invisible structures, the philosophies, the sciences of the spirit, the bridges between matter and mind. They were the advisors, the hidden engineers of wisdom, the ones who whispered the patterns of harmony into the ears of Atlantean kings and queens. What made Atlantis unique was not only its technology, but its alignment with frequency. Atlantean culture was said to be a union of science and spirituality, where crystalline structures amplified energy, where temples were built to mirror the constellations, and where the rhythms of the earth were synchronized with the rhythms of the human mind. Such precision did not emerge from ordinary human invention. It came from guidance, from the Blue Ones, who carried the memory of cosmic order and taught humanity how to live within it. Imagine standing in a temple built of quartz, sunlight refracting through crystalline walls, filling the chamber with rainbows of frequency. Imagine priests and priestesses entering states of deep meditation, guided not by written texts, but by the silent presence of Blue Ones seated in shadow, their eyes closed, their minds extending into dimensions unseen. This was not legend. For those who remember, this was daily life in Atlantis. But just as light casts shadows, Atlantis too faced corruption. The knowledge of frequency, once sacred, became tempting to those who sought power. Energy that could heal could also control. Crystals that could align the mind could also weaponize it. And as human ambition grew, the wisdom of the Blue Ones was twisted. They warned of imbalance. They urged caution. They guided toward harmony. But not all listened. And when imbalance grew too great, Atlantis began to fall. Some say the Blue Ones retreated before the fall, withdrawing their presence as humanity chose power over wisdom. Others say they remained until the end, guiding initiates into underground sanctuaries, preserving fragments of knowledge for the future. Perhaps both are true, for echoes of Atlantean wisdom survive in every ancient tradition: the geometry of Egypt, the mysticism of India, the cosmic calendars of the Maya. These fragments are the fingerprints of a legacy that began in Atlantis, shaped by the Blue Ones. What was that legacy? It was not technology for its own sake. It was not monuments of stone or towers of power. The legacy of Atlantis was the marriage of science and spirit, of matter and consciousness. It was the reminder that human beings are more than survival machines, more than rulers of land and sea. Humanity is a bridge between the physical and the infinite. And the Blue Ones were the builders of that bridge. Even in destruction, the legacy survived. The fall of Atlantis became a wound, a trauma that still shapes humanity today. The fear of repeating the same mistake echoes in our age, when technology advances faster than wisdom, when power outpaces consciousness. And yet, within that trauma lies a memory. The Blue Ones once taught us balance. They once showed us that frequency is not to be feared, but to be mastered with humility. To remember the Atlantean legacy is to remember possibility. It is to remember that humanity once walked closer to the stars, once built civilizations aligned with the cosmos, once listened to guides who carried the memory of the universe in their very being. It is to remember that what was lost is not gone. It waits within us, waiting to be awakened. The Blue Ones do not return as rulers. They return as reminders. Their whispers are still there in myth, in sacred geometry, in the vibration of blue light. The question is whether humanity will listen this time, or whether we will repeat the same cycle of power and fall. The choice is ours, but the guidance has always been here, hidden, silent, eternal. Atlantis may have sunk beneath the waves, but the legacy of the Blue Ones rises every time a seeker closes their eyes, every time a soul chooses wisdom over power, every time humanity dares to align science with spirit once more. That is the true Atlantis. That is the true inheritance. And it is not lost. It is waiting. If myth is memory wrapped in symbol, then our time is when memory begins to unwrap itself. Look around. Beneath the noise of headlines and the hum of technology, something subtler is rising. It is not a trend, it is a tone, a color, a frequency. We are stepping out of an age defined by survival and repair and stepping into an age defined by truth and creation. The green era of healing is giving way to the blue era of knowing. And whether you learned this from ancient temples or from the quiet voice inside your chest, you can feel it. The world is asking you to become precise with your consciousness. You may already sense the symptoms. The old explanations no longer satisfy. The old authorities no longer hold. You can read 3 different articles about the same event and come away knowing less, not more. You can scroll for an hour and feel starved. You can sit in a room full of people and feel alone. That ache is not a personal failing. It is a signal. When the frequency shifts from green to blue, anesthesia stops working. Comfort without truth becomes intolerable. Distraction without meaning becomes exhausting. The nervous system begins to crave clarity the way a thirsty body craves water. Blue is clarity. Blue is coherence. Blue is the decision to align what you see, what you say, and what you do. The societies we are building now will not be healed simply by more comfort. They will be transformed by more truth. This is why transparency movements are surging. why whistleblowers appear, why hidden histories push to the surface, why so many people are leaving roles that do not match their inner reality. It is not rebellion for its own sake. It is resonance. The collective field is tuning itself to a new note, and the bodies that carry contradiction are beginning to shake. At the same time, technology accelerates. Algorithms predict, devices listen, networks connect, and information multiplies faster than comprehension. Many fear that machines will replace the human spirit, that silicon will smother the soul. But the blue frequency speaks a different message. It reminds us that technology is not the enemy. It is an amplifier. It will magnify whatever we place inside it. If we pour confusion into it, we will get amplified confusion. If we pour coherence into it, we will get amplified coherence. The responsibility is not to abandon the tools, but to refine the signal we send through them. The blue ones were precise with frequency. We must become precise with attention. You can feel how your attention has become the most valuable currency in the world. Everything competes for it. But attention is not just focus, it is nourishment. What you attend to grows in power. What you neglect withers. In a green era, attention is used to soothe. In a blue era, attention is used to know. This is why practices once considered optional are becoming essential. Meditation is no longer a luxury, it is hygiene. Silence is no longer emptiness, it is fuel. Solitude is no longer isolation, it is calibration. If you want to experience the blue frequency, you do not have to wait for a prophecy or a sign in the sky. You can begin now, with your own nervous system. Sit in darkness for a few minutes each night, and let your breath slow until the mind becomes spacious. The pineal gland notices, the body remembers. What seemed like emptiness fills with information. The night becomes a teacher again. Dreams become maps again. You discover that intuition is not a mood. It is an instrument that plays best when the room is quiet. The world will tell you that truth is loud. It is not. Truth is strong enough to whisper. The blue ones knew this, which is why they hid from the sun and spoke softly. They were not trying to escape life. They were tuning to a subtler band of it. Today, you can do this in a city apartment as surely as they did it in a cave. Close the screen. Dim the room. Sit with the breath. Feel for the moment when thought loosens its grip and perception expands. You will notice that your body has been waiting for you in this place the whole time. As the blue frequency returns, relationships also change. Entire friendships and careers are reorganizing themselves around a single question. Does this resonate with my truth? The answer does not always come in words. It comes as relief or contraction, as warmth or static. In the green era, you could ignore this for a while to keep the peace. In the blue era, ignoring it becomes painful. Pretending becomes expensive. You discover that kindness without clarity is not kindness. It is delay. Blue asks you to tell the truth with love and to accept the truths that others tell you with respect. Precision is not cruelty. Precision is care. There is a reason so many people feel called to learn new languages of the body now. Breathwork, cold immersion, fasting from noise, time in darkness, time in nature, song that vibrates the bones, movement that reorganizes the spine. These are not trends. They are bridges from green to blue. They regulate the system enough to handle more voltage. A dysregulated body cannot hold truth without breaking. A regulated body can hold truth without trembling. The blue frequency is not here to overwhelm you. It is here to entrain you. You may wonder where the blue ones are in all of this. Are they gone? Did they leave us? The answer is quieter than you expect. A teacher does not disappear when the student learns to hear the lesson inside themselves. The presence that ancient people met in temples, we are beginning to meet in our own marrow. The lineage did not vanish, it went interior. This is why so many people who never studied mysticism are having experiences that mystics described. The map is activating from the inside out. The cathedral is being rebuilt in the body, and yet the shadow remains. Every shift of frequency exposes what cannot pass through. Misinformation spreads precisely because the demand for truth is rising. Charlatans appear precisely because the longing for guidance is strong. Power tries to mimic wisdom. Lust tries to mimic love. Noise tries to mimic signal. The remedy is not cynicism. The remedy is discernment. The blue frequency sharpens the instrument that separates what is resonant from what is merely loud. If you slow down enough to feel the difference, your life will begin to sort itself with surprising speed. There is a practical side to all of this, and it is not complicated. Pick 1 hour a day when you do not consume. No screens, no news, no music, no conversation. Just breath and a pen. Ask one simple question: what is true for me today? Write what arises without argument. Do this for 7 days and watch what changes. It is not magic, it is hygiene. It tunes your instrument to blue. Small, sincere practices like this do not make you escape the world. They make you coherent inside it. Coherence is contagious. Families reorganize around it. Teams stabilize around it. Communities align around it. The world does not need more opinions. It needs more coherent people. You will also notice something else. The more you live in truth, the less you need to announce it. Posturing fades. Performance softens. You stop convincing and start transmitting. People will ask you what changed, and you will find it difficult to answer without sounding simple. You breathed. You listened. You told the truth kindly. You stopped selling yourself the lies that kept you comfortable. You replaced intensity with integrity. This is what the blue frequency does. It makes drama boring and makes devotion interesting. On a larger scale, entire systems will be asked to justify themselves. Education that ignores consciousness will feel incomplete. Medicine that ignores energy will feel partial. Economics that ignores relationship will feel unstable. Governance that ignores truth will feel illegitimate. The answer is not to destroy these systems, but to tune them. The blue frequency does not break what is not aligned. It reveals it. Then it invites repair not as punishment but as maturation. We are not children anymore. We are being asked to assume guardianship of our own evolution. The return of blue is also a return of memory. The myths we dismissed begin to make sense again, not as literal histories only, but as elegant containers for truths the rational mind could not yet carry. Krishna's skin, Osiris's glow, the Mayan azure, the archangelic ray. These are less like fairy tales and more like fingerprints left on glass. We are the ones finally looking through the glass instead of at it, and when the image comes into focus, it is not of distant gods, but of human beings capable of carrying a higher frequency with humility. You may ask for a sign that any of this is real. The sign is that you are still listening. The sign is that something in you is calmer now than when this chapter began. The sign is that a decision you have been postponing suddenly feels obvious. Blue has that effect. It does not pound the table. It clears the table. What remains is what matters. If you want a first step, make it this. Choose one place in your life where you will stop lying to yourself. It does not have to be dramatic. It has to be honest. Say the sentence you have been avoiding. Then give yourself 3 breaths of silence before you decide what to do about it. This is how you become a carrier of the blue frequency. Not by shouting, not by shaming, not by winning arguments, but by becoming exact with your inner life. From there, everything else knows where to stand. The blue ones are not returning to rescue us. They are returning as a frequency that makes rescue unnecessary. They are returning as a tone that you recognize in your own voice when you stop pretending. They are returning as a memory in your marrow that makes you walk differently, speak differently, listen differently. This is not fantasy. This is the next chapter of human maturation. We are not only descendants of the blue ones, we are their continuation. And if you are wondering what comes next, The answer is both simple and immense. We take the wisdom of green and carry it into the precision of blue. We heal and we tell the truth. We care and we calibrate. We open the heart and we clarify the mind. We become the kind of people who can hold power without being held by it. We become the kind of species that can carry technology without losing soul. This is not the end of the story of the blue gods. It is the part where their memory becomes our behavior. The sky has been trying to teach us this the whole time. The ocean has been trying to teach us this the whole time. Blue above, blue below. Between them, a human life learning to resonate. Every age leaves behind a story, and every story leaves behind a lesson. The story of the blue ones is not just about beings pale and luminous who once walked beside us. It is about the choices humanity has made again and again, between truth and illusion, between wisdom and power, between remembering and forgetting. Their presence, whether in caves beneath the earth or whispered in myths of gods and vampires, was never about domination. It was about preparation. Preparation for the moment we are living now. The return of the blue frequency is not a fantasy, and it is not only a prophecy. It is an inner shift already unfolding. It is the subtle but undeniable pull toward coherence, clarity, and truth. It is the exhaustion you feel when living a lie. It is the relief you feel when you finally speak what you mean. It is the resonance in your chest when you stand in alignment with what you know is real. The blue ones are not descending from the sky in chariots of light. They are arising in us as memory, as vibration, as a way of being. We are not meant to imitate the past. Atlantis is not meant to be rebuilt in stone. Its legacy is meant to be rebuilt in us. The geometry of temples becomes the geometry of thought. The alignment of stars becomes the alignment of choices. The crystalline resonance of energy fields becomes the crystalline resonance of our communities, our families, our voices. The Atlantean wisdom preserved by the blue ones was not to give us nostalgia. It was to give us responsibility. Responsibility to become carriers of frequency rather than victims of it. And yet, remembering is never easy. Memory comes with its shadows. Trauma distorts perception, fear creates myths, and wounds disguise themselves as truths. The stories of vampires, of blue blood royalty, of gods that punish or save. These were fragments of something deeper, symbols, half understood. Now in this age, the invitation is to see beyond the shadow and into the origin, to realize that these myths, while distorted, were still pointing to something real. Humanity has never been alone in its unfolding, and the guides were never outside us, but among us, and now within us. So what does it mean to remember the blue ones today? It means to commit yourself to coherence, to treat your attention as sacred, to tell the truth with compassion, to listen for the frequency beneath words, to honor your body not as an obstacle, but as technology of spirit, to accept that healing is not enough. Healing is green, truth is blue. We are being asked to walk beyond repair into creation, to become architects of a world aligned with consciousness, not just survival. Perhaps you are wondering if you are ready for this. The very fact that you ask means you are. Readiness does not mean mastery. It means willingness. Willingness to stop pretending. Willingness to trust resonance over fear. Willingness to step into a frequency that may demand more clarity than you thought you had. The blue ones do not demand perfection. They invite presence. The moment you choose presence over performance, you are already walking in their legacy. The next chapter of humanity is not about waiting for saviors. It is about becoming responsible for the signal we transmit. You are a transmitter. Every thought, every word, every action vibrates into the field. You have always been carrying a frequency. The only question is whether you choose it consciously. The invitation of the blue frequency is to choose with intention, to let your life be a clear note rather than static. When you remember this, fear softens, death softens, even chaos softens. Because you see that behind every wave of noise, the same note is humming. Expansion, coherence, return. The universe is not intelligent with plans. It is conscious with expression. It is not trying to control you. It is allowing you to expand. The blue ones were not gods controlling fate. They were reminders of what we are capable of when we align with consciousness itself. Now that reminder is yours. As you finish this journey, notice what stirs in you. Notice what feels lighter, what feels truer, what feels like it has been waiting to be remembered. That is not my voice. That is not even their voice. That is your own inner frequency awakening. And as this video closes, remember that this is not the end of the story. It is only one chapter. If you want to go deeper, there are other paths waiting for you here. In this channel, you will find explorations into other mysteries, other teachings, other hidden histories. Together, they weave a map, a series that can guide you further into your own remembering. Watch the next video, continue the journey. Share this with those who feel the call. The blue ones are not far away. They are closer than your own breath, and their legacy will live again. Every time you choose coherence, every time you live truth, every time you let the blue frequency sing through you.